Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to what is going to be, I'm hoping, is going to be the study of the 48th chapter of the book of Genesis. Welcome everyone here. Glad to see you, and welcome everybody who's tuning in on YouTube as well. The 48th chapter of Genesis and the 49th, to me, they're extremely hard to separate. I don't think they can be separated. But when I get to this chapter, or these two chapters, it's rather like the 38th chapter of Job. This thing just, the grandeur of what we're about to see is really somewhat unsettling, and I've always felt I've never really quite up to teaching it. A lot of times I felt I've never really felt up to having it taught to me, but it is before us now. And so rather than tunnel, let's go through with our eyes wide open. And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, Behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, Behold, thy son Joseph is coming unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. And Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me. And said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. And now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. So let's take a deep breath at this point and think about what has just happened between Jacob, Joseph, and these two boys. Oh, come on. We're not all that cowardly.
Well, we know that
Okay, I am.
Instead of Joseph, he now has basically supplanted Reuben and Joseph with Ephraim and Manasseh. So we saw
Reuben and Joseph?
Oh, I'd say Reuben and Simeon.
Well, he took Joseph's two sons, but we don't have a tribe of Joseph.
We don't?
We have Ephraim and Manasseh.
That's Joseph.
That's Joseph, but
As long as Joseph's alive. And you may want to take a look over into Revelation and see whose names pop up. When they list off the 144,000 by tribe, take a real close look at those names. See who shows up. But yes, there is a supplanting here, and there's a reason. But Joseph is never supplanted. And we'll see how this works out, and it is rather miraculous. But you know it's going to happen because when you look up in the first verse, it says that Joseph took with him Manasseh and Ephraim. And when Jacob mentions it, it's Ephraim and Manasseh. See how he switched the names? In Old Testament nomenclature, and even when you get into the New Testament, if you're talking about the Jewish people, the name mentioned first is firstborn in the order. And Manasseh is firstborn. Ephraim is not. Now remember who these two men are. You have Jacob, who once fooled a blind father into thinking he was the older son. And there's Joseph standing in front of him, who knows that story just as well as Jacob does. We're going to see some real growth here in a minute. He says in verse 6, And thy issue, which thou begettest after them, shall be thine, and shall be called after the name of their brethren in their inheritance. Excuse me. And now we have verse 7, which kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in this chapter. And as for me, when I came from Canaan, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when yet there was a little way to come unto Ephraim. And I buried her there in the way of Ephraim, the same is Bethlehem. Now, what does that got to do with it? That's ancient history, and they both know this story. But why it pops up here? He invokes the name of the one true love of his life. In front of the son he loves more than anybody else living at this point. And he's saying, this was your mom.
More than Benjamin?
He's not going to leave anybody out.
More than Benjamin, do you think?
Do you see him?
I know. I just ask him questions.
It said that he loved him more than all the others.
That's what I wonder.
And Benjamin was alive at that point. And Israel beheld Joseph's sons and said, who are these? And Joseph said unto his father, they are my sons whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Pardon me again. I'm fighting my way through some new pills. We'll see how it goes. You pray, we'll be okay. I've had this taught, perhaps you have too, but this is actually the first time that Jacob has seen these boys. You have to ask who they are. And that isn't true. Jacob has been, at this point, in Egypt 17 years. The boys were born before he got there. Not much longer, but he's watched these boys grow up. He knows who they are. But he asked specifically. And Joseph said unto his father, these are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. Watch that language, bless. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age. Now we see why he's asking. He knows these are Joseph's boys, but they're very close in age. And he's going to make sure which is which. Which one is Ephraim? Which one is Manasseh? This is very important to Jacob right now that he knows. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age that he could not see, and he brought them near unto him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, God hath showed me also thy seed. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. Now I wanted us to set this scene very carefully, but he brought them out from between his knees. It looks like Joseph is pulling these boys out from behind him somehow, and no, he's already presented them to his father. When they're saying that that's Joseph, brought them out from between Jacob's knees. Now he's bringing them back to himself. And he's going to turn them around. Because he knows about patriarchal blessings. He knows how this is going to be. The boys have to stand in front of him. Have you ever seen a Jewish blessing? Oh, I'll tell you, that's something. Dad or granddad will lay that hand right up here on the top of the forehead. And it's spoken, depending on where they're from, either in Yiddish or in Hebrew, the blessing that they're going to get. I saw it happen once. And the boy looks at his dad and he says, you know, you sound just like Grandpa. And his dad said, you should be so lucky. I remember that very plainly. This is what's happening.
Well, and now the chapter started out as Jacob, now we're Israel.
Well, if you will.
When about the time the blessing is being invoked, I mean, is that, I shouldn't say is that important, because everything
is important. It is important, because he says, and let my name be named on them. Which name? Okay, when the name Jacob is used, we're talking about Jacob, the man who is the father of whichever son is in front of him at the time. When they're using the name Israel, it's the father of the 12 tribes.
So this is the father of one son is Jacob.
Yes, and when they use Israel, it is generational, because that is the name all of them take eventually. Now it'll get 400 years to get them there when they come out for that 40 years of wandering. But they get there. But the table is being set for them at this point. And I want to say something. It's also being set for us. Because I want to point this out very clearly as I possibly can. These words were not written for Jacob's sake, nor for Joseph's sake, nor for Manasseh's sake and Ephraim. They were all there and they heard it. These words are not written down until 450 years after this time. Now, do you want to make a guess on who they're for? On those who would come after and read them and believe them. And that's one of the reasons why I say I always feel a little insufficient to teaching the 48th chapter of the book of Genesis. Because I can hear these voices speaking to us. And that's echoing down a long time of history. But let's remember, the voices of Jacob and Joseph that we hear is only an echo. The voice, singular, is God speaking to you, to me. Or the book has no value to us. It should be, if it's just out to any who, well, no, it's to someone who would believe. Moses, when they go into the promised land, looks at that whole nation and says, we've been through all of it. We've been through the Red Sea together. He parted the Red Sea. You're going to go over Jordan. He's going to part that for you. Nobody's been able to stand before you. The manna has not missed a day. The water came from the rock. And oh, that there had been found among you a heart to believe. That's what God is looking for. And his word will not return unto him void, but it will accomplish that toward which he purposes it. And if he's in search of belief, he will find it. And it's my prayer, of course, that it's found among us, along with a little faithfulness thrown in for frills and dressings. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. This is the one who had had the dream that everybody's going to bow to him. And there he is, bowing in deep respect to his father. If you want to see the type of this, if Joseph ever types Christ, go to 1 Corinthians 15 and you look at that order, that divine order that is set up, where the Father says to the Son, okay, you sit here till I make every enemy, I'll put them under your feet, I'll make them your footstool. And then, when that's accomplished, and the kingdom is given to the Son turns around, gives it all back to the Father. And that's just what happened here. Now, here you have the two greatest men alive in the world at that time. As far as profane history, would care to record it. Nobody is blessed in the Middle East like Jacob. Nobody is as rich as he. Abraham was not as rich as he was. Isaac was more rich than Abraham. Jacob is more rich than Isaac. This guy is extremely powerful. And there is his son, second only to Pharaoh. Even the throne prince of Egypt cannot gainsay Joseph. And here they are. And it's a family affair. The rest of the world at this point doesn't matter because it's from these people that redemption plan is going to come forth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand, toward Israel's left, and Manasseh in his left hand, toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. Are we clear on this picture? If I'm Joseph and Jacob is facing me, and I want his right hand placed on my firstborn, the firstborn, I've got him by the back of the neck in my left hand. I'm presenting him. And I've got the secondborn over here in my right hand, and I'm bringing him forward. Hands probably on the shoulder. Joseph knows his father's blind. Joseph knows the story about Esau and the deception that happened. Even by mistake, Joseph does not want this to happen. And Jacob and Joseph are not in this room together to deceive each other or us. And at the last minute, then Jacob does this. So his right hand goes to the head of the younger son, and his left hand goes to the head of the older son. Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hand, notice, wittingly. He knows what he's doing. He knows which boy is which. For Manasseh was the firstborn, and he blessed Joseph. I thought he was blessing the boys. See? Joseph is never displaced. In blessing the boys, it's Joseph that's blessed because what is about to happen is the discussion of birthright as well as blessing. Now let's not mix these two up. One is financial, material, one is spiritual. They both come to the seed, but they're different. Now it says that he blessed Joseph, and watch how he blesses Joseph, and said, God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all of my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil. Do you remember when we were wondering just who that angel was? And I said, this is an appearance of God himself. Well, look who he said redeemed him. Angels can't redeem you. And as a matter of fact, there's no redemption for an angel, fallen or unfallen. They don't understand it. They're looking into it to inquire. It tells us that in Hebrews 2. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head and onto Manasseh's head. Joseph said unto his father, not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people. And he also shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he. And his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, in thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And if you want to be blessed like these two guys. That's how Israel's going to bless themselves. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Also look at that, the order in which he pronounces the name. It's Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said unto Joseph, behold, I die, but God shall be with you and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. Moreover, this is the birthright. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren. That's the double portion, that's the birthright, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. He's talking about Shechem. It's the only ground he ever bought. It's the only land he really owns. Abraham holds or held at his death the title deed to the cave at Machpelah. But Shechem is what Jacob bought. And as far as we have recorded in the Word, there's no other real estate that they own. Now, when he's talking about a portion above your brothers, whatever Jacob has at the moment of his death will be divided not 12 ways, but 13 into 13 pieces. And the one that receives the birthright gets the extra piece. That's the double portion. And it's interesting to me that everything that he's got is money, because he left everything else. You know, of course, they've got the cows and sheep and whatnot that they brought down there. But what Jacob has to give is money. But for the double portion, he gives him the land. Now, Shechem, you realize that's where Joseph is buried?
Buried, right.
He's buried in the portion. Now, here's one of the things I want to point out, too, if you want to see about how prophecy works. Beginning in the first verses of the next chapter, we're going to see Jacob become, he's going to turn into a prophet right in front of us. But he's already prophesying, and I don't want to say, because I don't know how far down the road that man saw, but he saw quite a ways. And he saw very, very, very accurately. When Israel goes into the promised land, before they go in, when they're on the far side of Jordan, Moses stops them. And right out in front of them, you have two mountains, Ebal and Gerizim, the mountains of blessing and cursing. Gerizim is the mountain of light, life, and blessing, and Ebal is the mountain representing death and cursing. When Moses says, I set before you this day life and death, blessing and cursing, therefore choose life. Gerizim is the mountain that dominates the view at Shechem, the promise of life. That's where Joseph is buried, and that's why he's buried there. Now, in the chapter before, we saw how important it was to Jacob that he not be buried in Egypt, but he be taken up to the cave at Machpelah and buried there. This is Jacob's faith. Jacob knows. I don't know what God has shown him in the walk since we last looked into Jacob's life, but he's shown him a very great deal. And here's a man who is sitting in a land that was not promised to him, accepting the belief in a resurrection which has not been promised to the people yet. He expects to be raised from the dead. And when he is, he's not going to walk from Goshen up to Hebron to go into his inheritance. He wants to be there when it happens. Now that's faith. That's the kind of faith that they talked about there in Hebrews 11 when they said they saw these promises afar off, and although they knew the promises weren't to them, they still saw them and embraced them and believed them. And God makes sure every one of those names is recorded. Moreover, I have given to thee a portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. He buys it from Shechem when he's first there before the incident with Dinah. And apparently after they left there and went down to Hebron, the Amorites got a little testy and decided they were going to take it back. And at this point, he says, I took it back with my sword and my bow. It's the only indication that any time in his life that Jacob used force or military strength. He only had to do it once. Didn't have to do it twice to make it stick. Once he did it, they knew, you leave this man alone. Jacob told the Amorites very forcefully what was theirs and what was his. And they, up until this point, they lived by it. And Jacob called unto his sons, this is the first verse of chapter 49, and said, gather yourselves together that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. All right, now let's stop there. How far do you want to take that issue of the last days? What does this mean? Last days. Anybody want to take a shot at that one?
Well, mine translates as what shall happen to you in days to come.
Exactly. Don't fall into the dispensationalist trap. This is what's going to happen down here during the Great Tribulation spoken of by the Apostle John. That's not what it means. I'm not saying that it can't go that far, because I believe it does. Or there's no reason of naming all 12 tribes again in order in Revelation, and John does that. That's how we know that Joseph is never ignored. The blessing never leaves him. It may pass through his children under other names, but no, this is what's going to happen to you and to your children in days to come. The word, in case you're wondering where I come up with such a radical statement, I'm going to write this down. It's Strong's lexical number of 319. It is pronounced Acharith, and it means basically posterity in time to come. Now, how far out that runs, like I say, I don't know. Gather yourselves together and hear ye, sons of, now what did he call himself? Jacob.
Oh, yeah.
And hearken unto who? He's used both names in one verse. He's going to speak both ways now. These are his boys, all grown up. Even Benjamin's got, what, 6 sons by the time he comes down there? So he's going to speak to his boys, but he's speaking to all of Israel, which will eventually take his name. Let my name be named on them. Reuben, thou art my firstborn in my might, in the beginning of my strength, in the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. That's firstborn. That's birthright. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. Unstable as water, it's not like trying to walk on water or trying to carry a cup that's a little too full. it is like looking at the surface of a boiling cauldron. There's no particular definition. Their strength, you betcha. Predictability, none. That's what he's talking about. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. Because thou wentest up to thy father's bed and defilest it, he went up to my couch. He's not only talking to Reuben, he's talking about him. Now you remember when we were studying this before, I said, he goes up there and says, Jacob heard about it. He doesn't say anything, he doesn't do anything. Oh, he's saying it now. It isn't a slide. He lost the birthright, and everybody knows why. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Oh, surprise, of course they are. They're all brethren. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. It's in their way of life. They're the ones responsible for the murder and the carnage at Shechem.
Yeah.
And Jacob did say a few things about that at the time. But now he's going to point out results. O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly. Mine honor be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they digged out a wall. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob, and I will scatter them, where? In Israel. Now he's divided in Jacob. So they're no longer part of that first birth order either.
Yeah.
And the birth order is beginning with Reuben, right? Then Simeon was born next, okay? And then Levi, okay? Who's the fourth one? Judah. But we haven't gotten to him yet, have we? No, we're talking Simeon and Levi at this point. And prophetically, down the road, scatter you in Israel. The tribe of Levi gets no ground. The temple and God's service is their portion. But they're placed in all the cities, scattered all the way out through Israel from Dan to Beersheba, plus the temple eventually at Jerusalem. But they have no territory. They have those cities. They are scattered in Israel. Now, Simeon, on the other hand, is totally surrounded by Judah. They're down at the southern end, at the north of the Negev. And Judah totally surrounds Simeon. They can't go in any direction without coming through Judah and Judah knowing it. Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be on the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Thy father's children. Who's present when he's saying this?
All of them.
His father's children, Judah's brothers. Judah, and don't you find that a little ironically funny? You got to remember, these are the ones that said, we're going to get rid of Joseph because he said, we're going to bow down to him. And Judah was the first one. Well, let's make a little money on it while we're conspiring. And here it is, oh, they'll bow down to thee. Okay, we're okay with it. Judah is a lion's whelp. Cub. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. Who was his prey? Joseph was. Let's make a little money on this. One was a predator and one was prey. He stooped down, couched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? The scepter, watch this one. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Well, we got that little issue with that name of Shiloh, don't we? Shiloh is a pronominal expression. It's a pronoun, and boy, we've all read the newspapers. We're all supposed to be really, really conscious about pronouns now. Is it a he? Is it a she? Is it a them? Is it a whatever? Well, it is a pronominal expression, and it means You can read it this way. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until he to whom it belongs comes. That's what it means. The house of Judah, and eventually the house and lineage of David, are only stewards to keep the scepter for the one for whom it is meant, and that's Christ himself.
Right.
Now you notice about the lawgiver from between his feet. The scepter, of course, is the golden, usually bejeweled rod, which indicates sovereignty and kingship. Lawgiver is another name for rod. Remember rod and staff in the 23rd Psalm? That is an indication of who has the ability to execute law. Who is the chief magistrate, which may or may not be the sovereign. In this case, it will be vested in the sovereign, and that staff is kept between the feet of the one sitting on the throne. So the kingship will never depart. The right to establish and administer the law will never depart from Judah. Binding his foal unto the vine, his ass's colt unto the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, his teeth white with milk. There is your type of triumphal entry, right there.
No fun?
Triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Palm Sunday, AD 30. There's the colt and full tied there. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for a haven of ships, and his borders shall be undecided. Issachar is a strong ass, couching down between two burdens. He saw that rest was good, and the land was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant of the tribute. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Zebulun, although it doesn't go all the way down to the sea, the economic influence that it had in Israel did extend to those port cities. And they were a great tribe of commerce and trade involving shipping by water. That came absolutely to pass. Dan shall judge his people. I'll go to the book of Judges and see what tribe these judges come from. They come from Dan. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. And it doesn't matter when you were a judge in Israel, and Dan is a judge. By the way, Dan means judge, literally, the name. If you take the name Daniel, from the book of Daniel, that can be read one of two ways. Dan is God is judge, Dan is the judge, and God El. It can be read that way, God is judge, or you can read it, God is my judge, rather than like, who are you? God is my judge. And it is legitimate to read it both ways, and there are times when it is read both ways. See how prophetic this man is getting here? Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse heel, so that his rider shall fall backwards. Those judges were just as good to execute judgment and punishment in Israel as they were upon any of Israel's enemies. Yeah, they were the adder by the path, and if you stepped off the path, and that adder was going to let you know, you better get back on the path. Doesn't matter whether you're a Philistine or an Ephraimite. I have waited for thy salvation, O Lord. This is another one of these verses that just doesn't seem like it belongs.
It's what?
It doesn't seem like it belongs in the narrative at that point. I have waited for thy... And this is Jacob that's speaking. Gad, a troop shall overcome him, and he shall overcome at the last. Take a look. If you have maps in the back of your Bible showing up how Israel is divided up tribally, take a look at where Gad is placed and how many times they get their cut kicked in before eventually they will triumph. And by the time of their eventual triumph, I think you can trust me on this one, it'll take till the millennial reign, but it will happen. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, he shall yield royal dainties. This is the bread basket of Israel. Naphtali is a highly let loose, he giveth goodly words. Here's your poets. Now look, no, Joseph is never displaced. Remember, this is not only prophecy, these are blessings. And he says, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. Look at the name again. This is a personal God. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breasts and of the womb, the blessings of thy father. Remember who gets a double portion of that? Oh, now my pages are sticking together again. And prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bound of the hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren. Now when he's talking about those blessings which go extend beyond the bound of the everlasting hills, you take the hills of Israel, and there are mountain ranges that pretty much describe the land. If you use that like the rim of a cup and fill that with blessing, his blessings go beyond life. As high as, what was it, how many cubits above the highest mountain was the flood? That's what it's talking about. Only this time it's not judgment, it's the blessings of God. Upon this man, Benjamin shall live in as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. Notice it says tribes. These are not just brothers now. Remember, these words are written 400 years after those words were spoken. All these are the tribes of Israel. And this is it, that their father spake unto them, and blessed them. Every one according to his blessing, he blessed him. And he charged them and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre. See how specific he is? Remember how specific that title deed was? It's going to be the trees, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, plus the cave, plus the field. Well, Jacob remembered that very well. He may be carrying a copy of it with him, I don't know. Which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephraim the Hittite for a possession of a burial place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife. And there I buried Leah. The purchases of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. He's just as specific about where he wants to be buried as he was about, okay, which boy's on my right hand and which boy's on my left. When Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered up his feet unto the bed and yielded up the ghost and was gathered unto his people.
Where was Rachel buried?
Rachel's buried just outside of Bethlehem.
What?
Bethlehem.
That's what.
Rachel's pillar.
Yeah, she wasn't.
Yeah, now he mentions that. Now he's also told Joseph, look, God will be with you and you'll go back up. Now Joseph never goes back except to bury Jacob. That's the only time that he's actually ever back in Canaan before he dies himself. But what applied to Jacob, God says, I'll be with you and I'll bring you back. Well, yeah, he's going to bring him back. Dead as a doornail, but he's going to bring him back. He's also going to raise him up eventually.
Yeah.
But the same promise. You remember where Jacob says the promises which were Abraham are mine, and now I'm going to put them on you. That's part of the promise, the resurrection. And what we are supposed to see, I believe, that promise which is made, first in the garden, and then is confirmed, not just announced to Abraham, it's confirmed to him. Do you see the difference? This just wasn't God down there having a meal with Abraham along the road one afternoon and said, say, I've got some good news to tell you. A couple of, half a millennia from now, you guys are going to own all this ground. The promise was confirmed to him. And it doesn't do us, if it wasn't, it doesn't do us any good because our promise, which comes to us by faith, We are blessed with Abraham. That's what it says in Romans. And if that promise were not made vouchsafed and confirmed to him, it doesn't make any difference whether we're with Abraham or not. Because it comes by way of Abraham, God said so. In thee will all families of the earth be blessed. And I'll bless him that helps that out, and I'll curse him that tries to hinder it. Now he's blessed Pharaoh beyond Pharaoh's wildest dreams because he's treated the family of Jacob well. There will arise a Pharaoh who will not, who will change it, and he will treat them harshly, will enslave them and make them serve with rigor. And God will destroy the Egyptian dynasty to the point that it will never again rise as a world power. The greatest empire the world has ever known. Gone under their own sand. That's Egypt. They're still digging out over there. Now, when we look at, well, you got to remember, you know, when they're probably just about ready to start building the pyramids. They were about 500 years old, or thereabouts, as close as they could figure, when Moses left. When Israel left. They figured they're about, so it's somewhere right in here. And those are the big ones. That's Cheops, Seneferu, and what's the third one? Of the three there at Giza, where the Sphinx is. The big one, of course, is Khufu, Cheops. Of course. But yeah, it's about 500 years old that they'd already been in. They're not ancient yet, but they're getting a little long maybe too. Now here is this guy who is, while they're still laying bricks for all I know, is looking down this corridor of time and whatever prophetic vision that God has given to him, and he's able to place each one of the 12 kids in the land to define their relationship to each other, to predict that the Savior would come through the house of Judah. Now before, all they knew was it's going to come from the family of Abraham. Now they know it's coming from Judah. And this is kind of interesting too about Judah. Judah's the one who stood up finally, and stood surety for Benjamin. So Benjamin, would go back. That's what breaks Joseph's heart. And from that point on, Benjamin and Judah are never separated. And it's kind of interesting. If you want to see an arm of protection, we're told in the Old Testament that God loves us with an everlasting love, and underneath are the everlasting arms. You want to see some arms of protection. You look at little teeny tiny Benjamin, where it is. And above it is Joseph's inheritance. And below it is Judah. And that is so well remembered by Benjamin and the tribe that when the kingdom eventually divides between Jeroboam and Rehoboam and the 10 northern tribes, which is still called Israel, you know who that is? That's Ephraim. That is Ephraim. It is known as Ephraim. And finally, God says, all right, leave him alone. Ephraim is joined to his idols. Let him alone. That is the only name of a son of Jacob you will not see mentioned in that list in Revelation. It is not there. Because he said, you go serve other gods. And they set up those golden calves. That was never forgiven. It'll never be forgiven. Now individuals will be. And this is where you get this catch-22 dealing with Joseph. That's why I say you got to be real careful about who's being blessed. What Jacob is doing. As long as Joseph is living, everything can be given to those two boys. And while Joseph is living, it's his. That's just all there is to it. Because he's also a son of the patriarch, isn't he? And it doesn't go to those two boys except by the fact that they are his sons. That makes it his. Now, if you take one of those names of the tribe away, it looks like the tribe has been done away with. It hasn't. Only in the name of remembrance, Ephraim does not show up. But individuals do.
But what?
But individuals do, because they are also named in Joseph. And Joseph is there. And you can't have a house of Joseph without having both Ephraim and Manasseh. So they're there, the individuals. But they come the same way we do. Not tribally, not nationally, but individually. And let's not forget who the first fruits of the gospel are. Maybe we have. Jews.
Oh,
You will be witnesses to me, beginning at Jerusalem and Judea to the uttermost parts of the earth. It started at the temple, and it went out from there. And I'll tell you what, I don't think there were very many Bostonians and New Yorkers in that upper room. And I'll tell you something else, I doubt there was very much bacon there either. Those were Jews. There's your first fruits. They are a kind of first fruits. And we're the one. Now, and we like to think that there's a Gentile bride, and everybody says Gentile bride. Yes, there are Gentiles in the bride. And Paul says, look, the tree is like the olive tree, and it was Israel to begin with, but he broke the branches off, and you've been grafted in. Paul doesn't say he broke all the branches off. Just a couple. The rest are still there. And it'll put forth a branch again. And he says, because he has the ability to do that, you be careful you're not pruned out for the same reason they were, which was not a misunderstanding of the covenant of Moses. It was unbelief. And we are as subject to that as humans as they are. And he says, you guard against that. And that's what we should. But these are the things, why I say it, these chapters, the 48 and the 49 chapters of Genesis, are so powerful in all the nuances of the meaning of these blessings. The giving of the birthright. I mean, we got 12 boys. He does this thing but it's Joseph that gets everything. And his name's hardly mentioned, other than the fact, well, separate from his brethren. He was shot at, but they didn't really hurt him. Well, who was doing the shooting? His own brothers. And look who now has mastery. I think in the New Testament we hear a few things about last being first, first being last. Now, I want you to go, if you want a little interesting little side study, as you go through the blessing of those 12 boys that Jacob just given, see if you can find another reversal of the birth order, because there's one I haven't told you about. Now, that's just a little gem for you to go look.
Now say it again,
There is
please.
another reversal of a birth order, which does not involve Ephraim or Manasseh,
Okay.
and it doesn't involve Reuben. There is another change in the birth order. And you have to go back, what is
yeah, I'd have to.
yeah, what's the chapter where it lists all the boys and who their mothers were? Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah and of course Rachel. So you'll have the birth order 1 through 12, but you'll find that there's been a reversal again. And that one stays reversed.
Genesis 29.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Wait,
29.
you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait until the dividing of the inheritance of the land to see a lot of these prophecies fulfilled. And I think that's one of the things that gives us hope. There are some things which are going to extend into the millennial reign in order to be finally fulfilled. But there's so much of it that is fulfilled even before they get to the promised land. For instance, Jacob prophesies that the younger of the two boys will be greater of the two. When they're marching toward the promised land, and they've got the tabernacle, and when that pillar lifts and they start to follow, the firstborn, Manasseh, marches under the banner of Ephraim. It doesn't even wait until it gets to the promised land before that's going to be fulfilled. And when that's going on, you can imagine these guys that are looking at the banners. That's something you can see. It's very, very visible. Well, that's just what old Jake said 400 years ago. Look at the numbers in the tribes. Yeah. Now, Manasseh will outnumber Ephraim in terms of land. It's huge. But Ephraim outnumbers Manasseh when it comes to people. That's powerful. And all all of that's mentioned here. Neither one of these boys are slighted because of what the other gets. See, that was the problem between Jacob and Esau. Is, well, one gets it, the other one doesn't. Well, no. God created the universe, and they tell me it's infinite. He can divide it any way he wants to, and he's not going to run out of anything if he wants to give it to you. That's something that Israel's about ready to learn. They're not going to get the entire universe, but they're going to get their little portion of it, and they never lose. That brings us up to 1:45. We might be able to get you up on time. Are there any questions or any comments? Next week will be the final chapter, which is chapter 50. There'll be a few summing up comments. So if you have some overarching questions, overarching gripes, overarching complaints, I will not be here next week to tell all the all correct. That is the thing. Probably never heard a complaint from anybody before in his entire career. No questions? I'm surprised. None.
No, you're quite thorough.
Flatterer. All right. Okay. I'm thoroughly done now. So when you say that, let's close the word of prayer. Heavenly Father.